Today, we're diving into what might just be the most baffling problem in all of science. And it's not out in the cosmos or deep in the quantum realm. No, it's right behind your eyes. We're talking about your conscious experience, that very feeling of what it's like to be you. Okay, so let's start right here with this classic idea from the philosopher Thomas Nagel. He basically said that for anything to be conscious, there has to be something that it is like to be that thing. It's not about what it can do, but what it feels like on the inside. This gets right to the heart of the mystery, right? Subjective experience. And that seemingly simple idea, well, it leads us straight into what's famously called the hard problem of consciousness. Now, look, scientists are actually really good at tackling the so-called easy problems. Stuff like how your brain processes light from your eyes or how it stores a memory. But explaining why all that electrochemical buzzing should feel like anything at all, why it should feel like the color red or the sound of a clarinet or the warmth of the sun, that is the truly hard part. Why is there an inner movie playing for you at all? In this quote, man, it just perfectly captures how daunting this field is. I mean, think about it. This is from a psychiatrist, someone whose entire job is built on listening to people talk about their inner subjective lives, and they call the study of consciousness a bottomless pit of quicksand? Yeah, that tells you you're up against something huge. So, how in the world are scientists even trying to tackle this? Let's take a look at the leading theories. You can think of them as the main suspects in this great mystery of the mind. All right, so our first suspect is basically the idea that consciousness is like having a thought about a thought. You don't just see the color red, your brain has another, higher level thought that says, hey, I'm seeing red right now. It's that extra layer of self-monitoring happening up in the prefrontal cortex that supposedly makes the experience conscious. The wild part is, this means your brain could be doing all sorts of stuff completely in the dark without you being aware, unless it has that special reflective loop. Okay, next up, we have a theory that pictures the mind as a kind of theater. Imagine you've got all these different processes happening backstage, totally unconscious. But when something is important enough, bam, it gets thrown onto the main stage under a bright spotlight. And that is consciousness. Whatever's in the spotlight gets broadcast to the entire audience, all the other parts of your brain that handle memory, language, and planning. So in this view, consciousness isn't some extra thought. It's more like a central broadcast system for the whole brain. Then we've got something completely different. It's called Integrated Information Theory, or IIT, and it's all about math. The core idea is that consciousness comes from how interconnected a system is, how its parts are woven together in a way that you can't just take it apart without losing something essential. IIT even tries to put a number on it, a value they call phi. And here's where it gets really wild. According to this theory, consciousness isn't just for brains. Anything with a high enough phi score, whether it's a super complex computer chip or maybe even the entire internet, could be conscious. And our last main suspect frames the brain as a prediction machine. Now get this, the idea here is that what you're experiencing right now, it isn't the raw data coming in through your eyes and ears. Nope, it's actually your brain's best guess about what's out there. Your brain is constantly making predictions, and your conscious reality is that prediction. It's like you're living inside a controlled hallucination that's constantly being updated and corrected by the real world. When something unexpected happens, that's a prediction error, and that's what makes you really pay attention. So when you lay them all out like this, you can really see how different these ideas are. Is consciousness a thought about a thought, a spotlight on a stage, a mathematical property of complex systems, or just your brain's best guess about reality? I mean, they're all coming at this from completely different directions. Okay, so scientists are busy debating all these theories, but then a series of now famous experiments came along and threw a massive wrench in the works, a twist that makes you question something we all feel we have: free will. These experiments, pioneered by a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet, asked a really simple question. Think about a tiny voluntary action, like deciding to flex your finger. Do you consciously decide to do it, and then your brain makes it happen? Seems obvious, right? Well, the results were absolutely stunning. Look at this timeline. The brain shows a specific spike of activity. They call it the readiness potential, and it starts more than half a second before the finger actually moves. But here's the kicker. The person in the experiment only feels the conscious urge to move about 200 milliseconds before the movement. The brain is way ahead of them. So let's be super clear about what this means. That electrical activity, that slow ramp up you see on the graph for a supposedly voluntary action, it starts a whole third of a second before you even feel like you've made the choice. It's like your brain has already decided to press the button before it tells you. This just turns everything we feel about making choices completely upside down. It suggests that your conscious decision isn't the cause of your action. It's more like a notification that pops up after your brain has already set things in motion. Consciousness, it seems, might be the last one to get the memo. And it gets even weirder. This diagram shows us something else. The actual time from when the brain starts the process to when the finger moves, that's a pretty big gap. But the time you feel between deciding to move and actually moving, it's much, much shorter. Your brain basically edits your sense of time to make it feel like your will and your action are one smooth, instant event. It creates this powerful illusion that you are in charge. But here's the thing. The Libet experiments and pretty much all research into consciousness hit a giant brick wall. And it's maybe the single biggest challenge in this whole field. Think about it. The whole experiment relies on people telling us what they're feeling. We have to take their word for it. But what do you do when you can't ask?
And that right there is the measurement problem. How on earth do you test for an inner feeling in something that can't talk? How would you ever know for sure if your dog is conscious, or looking to the future, if an AI is truly conscious?
This leaves scientists with two giant hurdles. First, how do you know your test is actually measuring consciousness and not just, some really clever automatic behavior? And second, even if you have a test that works on humans, with our specific kind of brain, how could you ever use that on something with a totally different setup, like a squid or a silicon-based AI? And this is a really important point that often gets lost. Most of our tests are designed to tell the difference between what's happening consciously and unconsciously in a person's mind, like when you're driving on autopilot. But what we really, really need is a test that can tell the difference between a conscious being and a non-conscious one, something that has no inner life at all, like a rock. And that, my friends, is a much, much harder problem to solve. So because it's so incredibly hard to even measure consciousness, some thinkers have started to go way out there. They're pushing the boundaries of science and asking some truly mind-bending questions about reality itself. Okay, one of the most radical ideas out there is called panpsychism. And it basically says, hey, maybe we've been thinking about this backwards. What if consciousness isn't some special thing that only happens in complicated brains? What if it's a fundamental property of the universe itself, just like mass or electrical charge? The idea is that every piece of information has two sides, a physical side that we can measure and an experiential side. And if that's true, then everything, literally everything from an electron to a rock, has some tiny, tiny bit of consciousness. And that leaves us with one last, really provocative thought to chew on. If an idea like panpsychism is even close to being right, then this whole search for consciousness isn't just about figuring out how the brain works. It's about figuring out our place in the cosmos. It would mean that you're not just a machine that has consciousness. You're a complex, concentrated piece of a universe that is itself conscious. So if that's the case, what does that make you?